How I went from indie to trad in 8 months, part 2A. This one's about honing my craft. And I know that sounds so pretentious, but I think it's important. It's important to learn how to write books. If you want to be a writer, you got to know how to write. And that starts with just writing. That's how you learn. It's on the job experience. So I think an important part of my story is the fact that Cello's Gate was not my first book. It was my fifth. So I'm going to talk about them. The first book I ever wrote was a dystopian superhero book, and it was dog water. Let me tell you, it wasn't great. So I spent about a year reconceptualizing it and then wrote a completely different book, same characters, totally new story. At this point, I was a pantser. Also, I'm going to point that out. I was a pantser. That's how I was like, this is how I write books. I just let it flow. Otherwise, I'm not motivated. Yeah. So I did that. Nothing against pantsers. Kind of. No shade. But like, you're standing under a tree. Anyway, the second one, it was a superhero dystopian, and I think it was cool. It still wasn't great. I had a really hard time at that point editing. I went back to edit, and I was just like, I can't do that. I don't know how to get into this. I don't know what to change. And that is the point in which I became a bigger reader. It was at that point in my journey where I was like, if you want to be a writer, you got to be a reader. And I stand by that. Clock that, quote it. If you want to be a writer, you got to be a reader. One of the best ways to study storytelling is to read them. So you got to write and you got to read. Okay, write and read. That's how you become a trad author. That's not the whole story, but it's definitely a big part of it. So then I went on and I was like, you know what? What if I wanted to write something a little more serious? I was like, oh, do I want to be relegated to commercial fantasy? Ooh, I wanted to win a Pulitzer. You know what I mean? Like that was the 23, 24-year-old Maurice was like, bro, we can do this. So I wrote a very upmarket literary sci-fi a la Black Mirror, and it was fun. It was purple as fuck, like it was so purple. And I did query it. I think I queried like 10 agents with it, and I don't even know if I got a single rejection or just did not hear from anyone. And then I moved on. Well, I had this concept, and I thought it was brilliant. It was about this couple who gets a sex robot, and because the wife needs PT, and these sex robots can be programmed to learn, they're cheaper than hiring a live-in nurse, basically. It was so funny. I think it would make an incredible script. And this was the book that I believed in it. I believed wholeheartedly that this was going to be the book that takes me to that next level. And I queried like a crazy person, and I got several full requests and ultimate rejections. And yeah, I think it led it to my first writer breakdown. Would you look at that? I ran out of time. So I don't want these videos to be like super long. So I come back for the rest.